Hi everyone, welcome back. So this is going to be our Pirates Cove activity. So for this lesson you're going to need some green and blue pencil crayons, and I just have some extras in case mine break. And you'll need your ruler and pencil, of course. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our page, and for Pirates Cove you can do it as a portrait or you can turn it and do it as a landscape. And I'm gonna do mine as a landscape. So that means I turn it this way. And that's because I'm drawing a map, and you'll see very shortly how this activity works. So the first thing I'm gonna do, just like when you're writing, I'm gonna make horizontal lines across the page. So I'm gonna go all the way, starting at the top, making my lines. And you'll notice that I'm not going to the edge of the page. That's okay, because that's where I'm going to put my letters and my number. So Pirates Cove is basically like a battleship, but instead of looking for ships, I'm looking for pieces of a map, and as I fill them in, I'm looking for the treasure, but we're building a map as we look, is a better way to put it. So I'm gonna number this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for this map. So I'm actually gonna start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I don't actually need that line down there, but that's okay. And then I'm not going to the edge of the page, I'm just going outside where I put my numbers for my starting line. And I'm going up just a little bit past this line. I'm starting up here, and I'll show you why. Because I'm gonna put A in this first box right here. So this would be A1, A2, just like in Battleship. So now I'm going, oops, I don't need to go all the way to the bottom. And along the top, I'm gonna go A to H. No, yeah, H. I'll show you what I mean. So you're gonna set up your grids, and we call these coordinates. Coordinates mean you have 2 numbers, 2 letters, or a letter and a number. So in Battleship, we say A7 or B5. All right, so I have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And I actually don't even need this space over here, so I'm gonna get my big eraser and I'm gonna erase all this so it's not distracting to me. So while I get my eraser, why don't you set up your page, A through H, 1 through 6. Now when I play this game in the classroom, I make pirate teams, and there's usually 2 teams, and the first group gets to pick the first coordinate. So they might pick E3, and then I fill that in and I say, nope, no treasure, or maybe I'll tell them about the treasure, or if there is treasure, then we win the game and we start again. But since we're in your home, and you're not in the classroom with me, and this isn't live, I'm just gonna fill it in randomly. And one of the ways that you can do that, if you do wanna play a random game with somebody, you can make a dice, and on the dice, one of them can have a letter and one of them can have a number. Or you can just randomly fill it in. So, for this one, I know where the treasure is, so it'd be kind of fun to make a dice. And that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go get a die, and well, I think I'll actually just randomly do it. All right, so here I have my grid, and I've got my pencil crayons ready to go. And you can pretend, you could even use an eraser as a die and flip it, but it wouldn't be very good because it'll just land on the flat side. So here we go. I'm going to choose E2 first. And I'm choosing E2 because this is one of the most important places in early Canadian history. It's got the city of Quebec. And this right here, I'm gonna color blue because it's the St. Lawrence River. So in E2, you're gonna color a little bit of the St. Lawrence River. And then the rest, I'm gonna shade green. And now you can kind of get an idea about what we're doing. We're filling in our map piece by random piece. So right now you can try and guess where the treasure is. And once I've filled in the whole thing, then I'll reveal where I put it. And you can see how close you were. So one of the really cool things about the St. Lawrence River is that farms, all the first pioneers had farms along the river, and they were divided out into really cool grids called seigneur systems. I'm gonna draw it right here. So if you have a river, on either side of the river, there'd be these long strips of land. And then there might be a road going through like this, another road, who knows? Oops, it's not a very good road system, is it? There we go. So there might be some roads, and there might be another small river that comes in. Let's color this so you can see. So there might be a small river here, and then there would be more farms on the other side of the road, but they might be fatter, or some of them might be even longer. And then you get into some stranger shapes. But the ones along the river were very straight. And right at the river, they would probably have a dock because the transportation up and down the river was easy. And then on the other side of the river, same thing. And then they'd have their house, and they'd have their fields, some close, definitely have some close. And then up at the top, there was always a church on the property as well. And more than one family might live on one strip of land. So I'm going to teach you a little bit more about the seigneur system when we start to do our log cabin activity. But now you can kind of get a picture of what it would look like. So if you zoomed in quite close, that's what it would look like. Okay. All right, so we have our seigneur system. See, I forget how to spell that, so I'm gonna have to look it up. S-E-I, I think. I'm gonna look it up before I write it. Okay, I forgot, there's one piece right here that I'm also gonna color blue. It's part of a lake, and it's called Lake Champlain. Since it's there, it might extend longer or it might end there. We don't know. So now I'm going to choose another random one. I'm going to do H1. H1. And H1 has, and if you want, you can draw it with pencil first. So H1 has a strange little piece sticking out like that. And then it's got a piece like that. And most of it is blue, but it's not a river anymore. This is the ocean. So up here we have the ocean. And do you know what ocean that is? Do you remember from Catherine Parr's Trails story? That's the Atlantic Ocean. This is one of the most important spots right here because this is where the ships would have come in. This is the port that they would have seen when they were coming and settling in Canada. Where should I pick next? How about C4? C4? Oh, C4 is easy. It's just land. So I can just shade the whole thing in land. A lot of mountains in this area. It wouldn't have been flat. Lots of mountains and maybe little lakes and little rivers. And now let's see. Okay, G5. G5's the opposite. G5, just ocean. So out here, you're really in the ocean. Part of the Atlantic Ocean. There we go. Where should I go next? Up here? Whoops. All right, so up here, A1, there's a little bit of a lake up here. I'm not even sure the name of that lake. It's not on my original map. The rest is all land. But this part of Canada actually is full of lakes. If you fly overhead, you see tons and tons of little lakes. And this part of Canada is Ontario nowadays. But back then, it became New France, and then it was Upper and Lower Canada. There we go. So, this land was owned by a famous fur trade company called the HBC, the Hudson's Bay Company. It was Rupert's land first. So it was used as a fur trade land. All right, let's see, where should we go next? Let's go down here. C6. C6, I'm gonna do my pencil first. And C6 has tiny little bit of land there. And then just a random shoreline. I'm not too worried about it being exact. So this is a random shoreline, that's your hint, because a shoreline is on the ocean. This territory down here was originally conquered by the Spanish. So it was Spanish territory. There were lots of First Nations people in this area, but the Spanish used it as a trading area. They'd have their ships come through here and trade. So this was a very important region. All right, next. F4. F4. Just got a little bit of land in F4, but it kind of sticks out like a little peninsula and comes up. There's not very much going on there, but this area is very close to New York. What's New York now? Just up here. It's a little hint. And I think this is now Virginia, down here. New Jersey, maybe. It's hard when you have just pieces of the map to tell. And that was American territory. Right here, this is the American territory. But before it was American, it was British. So you had a lot of French settling up here and a lot of British settling throughout. and we're gonna see what happens. Okay, where should we go? Here? D4. Oh, D4. It's like one of the hardest ones in the whole, actually, D4, I think, D4, D4 screen. That one's just green. But I am gonna do next to it because that is one of the hardest pieces in this whole map. I'm not too worried about the specifics, but it is really important because this is where one of the very first settler colonies happened. And there's lots of famous stories about the settler colonies that happened here in Virginia, because when you look at this piece of the map, you're going to understand why it was so important. So this bay goes really far up, and then it comes down, and it kind of looks like a pointer finger. It looks like a guy pointing like that. And then it comes around and you got a little bit of a crocodile mouth going on. And then it comes out and comes out again. And then there's also kind of quite a few islands. So that's one of the hardest pieces on our map. Don't worry too much about getting all those little craggy points, but it is, you can see, a really interesting place to settle. Now you're going to have to go on Google Earth or look on a map and go close up and see. That's one of my favorite things to do, is use Google Earth to take a look at all these different places. And you can kind of start to understand why people settled in certain areas. Because it's protected from the ocean. There's probably a lot of beaches and places where you could park a ship, or dock a ship, I mean. Once you built your docks. All right, so now you can see our map starting to come together. And the next spot I'm going to do I'm gonna do B2. B2, it's a little bit tricky. It's got a lake here. It's got another lake here, joined by a river. And then it's got another lake here that sort of scoops around like that. This one's really complicated. I think I'd have to look at a big map to get it right. And there's also a really neat fort right here. And forts were really important because they became part of the fur trade. So I'm putting stars where the forts were, just so we can kind of see where people were settling and building fur trade forts. This land in B2 is part of the Huron Nation. And so this lake right here, we have Lake Huron, and then we have part of another lake which isn't revealed yet. So this is part of the Huron territory. And the Huron people were very important to the fur traders. They helped them quite a bit. And later on, when wars broke out between the Americans and the British, the Hurons had to pick a side. There we go. Okay, so next we have, we'll go back over here. And I'm going to H3, H3, H4, H5, H6, G6. These ones are basically I'm helping you a little bit here by filling all of these in. All part of the Atlantic Ocean. Do you know what's in this square? This is about where the Bermuda Triangle is. Have you ever heard of the legend of the Bermuda Triangle? People used to say that it was a place where ships went down and planes went down, right about here in H5. And lots of legends were told about why that was. It was quite a mystery. And if you want to look that up, and you can tell me what your theories are about the Bermuda Triangle. But I actually know somebody who lives there, and I don't think it's got the same craziness going on that it used to, if indeed those legends were true. Okay, nothing's happening over here yet, so I should probably let you know that down here, this is the ocean down here, but there is one of the most famous rivers in all of North America running right through the middle of this map right here. Do you know the name of that? What's the most famous river in all of North America? There's quite a few major rivers, but this one's one of the most famous. If you know the story of Huckleberry Finn, it makes it very famous. And this river basically split the American colonies from the Wild West. As soon as you crossed over this river, you were in the Wild West. And it was a dangerous place and an unknown place, and there weren't very many, there wasn't information or maps about it. So this is the Mississippi River. And since we're talking about the Mississippi River and where it comes out into the ocean, we should probably, and this is the Gulf of Mexico nowadays, down here, we should probably talk about where it started, which is in A2. So in A2, we're going to finish this little lake right here. And then we have Lake Superior, like this. And Lake Superior kind of has an interesting sort of grabby claw thing going on. Lakes are hard to draw. Yeah, we'll do it like that. Perfect. So Lake Superior, Lake Huron. Don't know the name of that lake. And there was 2 fur trading forts right around here, so you know this is a really important area. And I think the Mississippi basically started up around here. Parts of it would have come out of a lake. So lakes start in mountains. Rivers start in mountains as streams and creeks, and then join up into rivers. Usually they come from lakes. I can't think of any rivers that I know in my area that don't come from lakes. There's Lake Cowichan, and then you have Cowichan River, and then you have the Coxsila River, and then you have Shawnigan Lake, which has the Mill Bay Shawnigan Creek. So rivers start up at lakes and in mountains and end down in the ocean. So this Mississippi River, we're just going to go like this, cuts right through this territory like this. It's a big river. And so a lot of people would have come up the river or down the river to get into the Great Lake area. And they would have used this as a major transportation route. And they still do. Lots of river boats and steamboats, paddle boats would have traveled up here. And when you get into American history, the Mississippi plays a really big role when we talk about slavery and the Underground Railway and the freedom of slaves. A lot of them used this river to escape from their plantations down in the South where they were slaves. So the Mississippi River, M-I-S-S-I-S-S-I-P-P-I. It's a lot of I's and a lot of repetition. Mississippi River. Now where should we go? Somewhere we haven't been. Let's go here. Because I think this is one of the most important spots for New France. This is one of the most important spots to me. G2 starts here, kind of comes out here, boop, boop, boop. Got a little point there, and there, comes down here. There we go. Something like that. And then it's got a little bit of a hammerhead shark or something of an island right there. I think I'm going to add, maybe it's not very proportionate now. I squished it in, but there's something else there, which we're going to discover. So the reason I said that this is one of the most important areas in all of New France or early Canada is because this became known as Acadia. It's part of Quebec now, and this is PEI now, and New Brunswick. And that's where a lot of settlers came in. But this was the Micmac Nation. And the Micmac Nation were probably one of the first nations that encountered people from Europe. And so you had a lot of ports going in here and settlements. So I would call this, and I'm gonna write all the nations down after, but so far we have the Huron Nation, the Micmac, I think it's Micmac, excuse me if I get that wrong. And then we also had the Spanish territory down here. I'm gonna write Spanish territory. And remember that we had the British coming in along here and the French, but they sort of start to push each other away. The British start to push this way and they push the Spanish out and they push the French. And so we're gonna see some conflict happen when that happens, of course. And those are the two nations that we have so far. There's 5 major nations that we're gonna talk about. Let's talk about another really important nation. So if we continue in this area, we have, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, scooch down here. This is kind of what's known as New Hampshire, and then New York and all that. This part got a little wonky. And you have one of the most famous nations. Lake Champlain is actually over here, but that's okay. I made a bit of a mistake. So this nation right here, the Iroquois, they're one of the most famous nations because they formed a confederacy, and that means a whole bunch of nations got together to try and maintain their way of life and protect themselves from all the conflict that was happening between all the settlers. Between the settlers and with the settlers, because they were encroaching on their territory, building their farms and doing their fur trade. So all the people that were there first, the first peoples, got pushed further and further and further away or squished into reservations. So when the Americans started to immigrate, once America became America later on, especially in the 1800s, most of them came in through this area and settled from this area. Okay, we have a little bit of Acadia to finish right here. So Acadia comes down like this and goes over like this. And one of the most famous bays in all of Canada. The Bay of Fundy is here, and it has the highest and lowest tides, I think, of anywhere in the world. That's what makes the Bay of Fundy so famous. And we have a little bit of Queen Charlotte Islands to finish, and I call it the whale tail. Kind of looks like a whale tail. I haven't drawn that at all correctly, but looks like a little bit more like a Game Boy. That's okay. It's the thought that counts. So Queen Charlotte Islands, what's now Nova Scotia right here. Nova Scotia has lots of farms, and some of them are some of the original farms from settlers. Do you remember how many years ago Catherine Parr Trail came? 177 years ago. People came before that, but that's when a big immigration. Acadia. All right, and we'll talk about reasons for immigration. Immigration is people who come from somewhere else. Okay, so I'm going to finish up the coastline here. Let's see, what happens up here? We've got a little bit of a tip, and then a bay, and then the bay comes out and kind of looks like a little fish head, like a minnow. And we've got the land up here, and this, of course, is the entrance to the St. Lawrence River. So lots of ships would have had to stop in a port either here or around here before they went down the St. Lawrence River, because when they came across the ocean, a lot of them had diseases, and they didn't want people downriver or on land to get those diseases like smallpox or typhoid. And so they asked them to stop and quarantine in these places. Down in New York, at Ellis Island was a famous spot that they quarantined. And Willis Point on Vancouver Island, right in Victoria, Willis Point was a big quarantine area. And so you would have had to make sure that nobody on your ship was sick before they went downriver or landed on the mainland. And that must have been really hard for people who spent all those weeks and months on a terrible, terrible ocean voyage to see land but not be able to get off the boat. And Catherine Parr Trail actually talks about that too. She said it was just torture, waiting and waiting to get onto the land. So those seigneur farms start all along here. Let's finish the St. Lawrence River. So after Quebec, and I think Quebec is actually a little off, but that's okay. So once you go to C3 down here, you end up in Lake Ontario. That's a pretty famous lake because that's, of course, where the St. Lawrence River starts. Remember that they start in a lake. It's a bit fatter than that. It's a big lake. I don't even think you can see across to the other side. And we'll make it a little bit fatter. Okay, so Lake Ontario, but just below Lake Ontario was Lake Erie, and so that's another nation, E-R-I-E, the Erie Nation. And right next to the Erie Nation were the Shawnee. Shawnee. There we go. So we have Lake Ontario. Give that color in. Lake Erie. And if you go in between there, that's Buffalo. And if you take a bus from Toronto, you go here, that's how you get to New York. You have to go through these lakes. And I think that's where Niagara Falls is. All of a sudden, my memory's failing me. I'm gonna have to take a look. Sometimes when I start thinking about the past, I can't really orientate myself in the present. But I'm pretty sure Niagara Falls is right there. Lake Champlain's a little bit off, but here's Lake Champlain. And Lake Champlain is named after a very famous Canadian explorer. Lake Champlain, there we go. And there's a very important fort here as well. And pretty much all of this is going to be green over here, except in B2. So we can give this all a good green. All right, so this is all Rupert's Land up here. And Rupert's Land basically forms around the Hudson's Bay. So here's the very end of the Hudson's Bay, goes up like this, and that's Rupert's Land, which was originally purchased by the HBC. And so they had the rights to that land to do fur trade. So we'll call this Rupert's Land. There we go. We have Lake Ontario. Lake Ontario. Lake Erie. We have Lake Huron. And then we have Lake Superior. And how many Great Lakes are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. And the other one, Michigan. Let's finish Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan goes down like a thumbs up. Does it? Where are we? Let's do this one first here. This bit here goes down. Oh yeah, it looks like a bit like a mitten. And comes up. And then, oh, the reason it's wrong is because it should come out. It actually has like a peninsula coming out there. People who live in this region are gonna think I've just completely ruined this map, but my apologies. There we go. So we have Lake Michigan. Looks actually like two little mitts. It's gonna be really funny when we look at an actual map and see. That's one of the things about Pirates Cove. It looks like antlers. That's okay. We're getting the idea of it. Oh, we forgot to finish Lake Erie. Lake Erie comes up like this. Now, one of the reasons that I'm pointing out these Great Lakes, even if they look incorrect, imagine that you arrive here. Imagine that you arrive on your ship and you're settling along the St. Lawrence River. But imagine if you're looking on the fur trade route to settle inland. You would travel down here, you go to Lake Ontario, you might travel by carriage or walk, or there might be smaller rivers, but probably impassable, get to Lake Erie. And from Lake Erie, there's actually an island in between here, or another lake, I mean. And you would travel up this lake, like you could get all the way to the Mississippi River and basically have this round trip trade route. And that's why these Great Lakes and these river systems are so, so important to our map. So let's finish up the coastline here. Basically, I'm not even gonna think too much about it. I'm just gonna do some squiggly lines so that we can color all this in. There we go. Oops. A little bit of ocean near the bottom here. And what is now Florida extends out here as a peninsula. So you would have had to go all the way around that peninsula. We'll make it like that. people who live there are going, that doesn't look right. That's okay. So here we go. We have created, piece by piece, something of a map of the East Coast, is basically what we'll call it, the East Coast, New France. We have the American colonies. There's the 13 colonies, which extended all the way along here. We have the Spanish territories. We have Rupert's Land. And this is the map that basically changes over and over and over again. It changes between who's fighting for power in that area for resources, either for trade routes, for the fur trade, or for land where they can have settlers come. So there you go. There's Pirates Cove.